All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Youngstown's Talk Channel. Welcome, everybody. Really doing what this is kind of reminiscent. No, and if you notice, Kelin is not sitting in front of me today, going solo. This is reminiscent of talk radio days. Spent, way over a decade, sharing opinions and bringing up topics to get conversations. And it's almost like it's renewed. Sort of renewed life in the space because we went for a period of time where we had radio hosts that sole obligation was to get people talking, get people fired up, get their blood pressure up, and get them to question the status quo. Like the media and citizen journalism and radio hosts are meant to kind of push on some of your beliefs and some of your emotions to get you to share into the public discourse. And I think it's talk radio was a great tool to let individuals have a place to be able to share their opinion and to let others, into their mindsets. And I think when we have that disconnection, we feel like we're being ruled by other people and whatnot. But it also, the pendulum swings in the other direction with technology allowed everybody to speak. And now we're constantly inundated with messaging from people, constantly in a state of fight or flight, hearing stuff that gets at us a little bit. And it's harder to escape and have downtime away from those opinions. And it's not a healthy state to be always have your dander up and always arguing with someone. I happened to spend the weekend camping around people who most of the conversation was dominated by kids and family and dreams and goals. And there was very little commentary on things that angered and rustled feathers. And it was kind of nice to be able to escape that. But I still think the talk radio format and the way to get your voice, no matter if you're a trained professional or have license to be on the air, has a chance to be able to vocalize some of your feelings. And again, when displeasure or you get upset about something, there's a place to be able to spout that off. So during the program today, if you want to call 330-595-1600, I do have the phone lines on. So you can share with me. So I was in Trumbull County camping up in Cortland. And so I was close enough to the Trumbull County Fair. They had their Halloween festival up that way. So we decided to go. They had a demolition derby. And as a kid, I love racing, motorsports, things that make a lot of noise, the smell of gasoline and things crashing each other. I got a little helping of that with the demolition derby. But before the program got on its way, because of everything that's happening with Charlie Kirk and the violence that's prevalent, the MC for the event got on the intercom, and really, I just think things have shifted, and there are so many people that are ready to come together and not be divided, and sort of like having a common thread of, sort of like connection with other people. And it was all about patriotism. It's all about, for love of country and love of one another and whatnot. And that was kind of inspiring me as the pessimist when it comes to people. That was really gave me a glimmer of maybe that's things to come. And then you have the memorial service in Arizona and just the hundreds of thousands of people who came together to remember Charlie Kirk. And I think I didn't see all the speakers. I think it was every bit of 5 hours. And I saw the opening segments where they had pastors and singing. And then I listened to a couple of the speakers, listened to some clips of the speakers after the fact. And I think everybody did a fair job of commemorating what addition Charlie Kirk did to the for and to the conversation, especially with engagement of younger folks who, I don't think a lot of younger folks are good at having their beliefs be pushed on, right? And public discourse is all about saying your thing and letting people say something back to you. And through the scrutiny of those exchanges, you come up with sometimes common ground. You sometimes come up with agree to disagree. But I think it's such a healthy deal for someone opposed to you to say their piece and keep pushing on your beliefs it makes both people better. And I think the younger generation got really used to people coddling them in the public, and having been put stuff on a special shelf, a sacred shelf, where something couldn't even be pushed back on. And that kind of zealotry, that, almost making a religion out of certain ideals as something that you couldn't question, is the worst kind of religion. And, I have a healthy dose of skepticism. When things get bad, I probably have an unhealthy dose. But I think my skepticism kind of keeps me grounded, so that I don't, mindlessly have a belief system that nobody pushes back on. So it's cool to be able to see, young people a little uncomfortable having to push on things, and not just their beliefs be something that can't be questioned. Although I do have to point out that there were a couple of speakers, Trump to be named, that I think he took the opportunity to take something that I felt was all about Charlie as the centerpiece. And I think he got a little derailed and making it a little bit too overtly political. And you can't change Trump's motives. He's always going to be that way. I just would have hoped it would be different, that you push on the messaging and push on the legacy and push on what's to come next, not necessarily, stumping during that. And so again, that's typical Trump. But I think Erica did an amazing job. And I think the hardest thing to do, and I put myself in her position, someone you deeply care about was taken from you through violence, and she forgave him on that stage. And I had a couple of people on my social media feeds saying, you know what, the perfect resonating message would be, even when it's freaking hard, if a Christian can get behind that podium and say, I forgive you, would take everybody in that audience and put in that same circumstance and say, well, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could be a big person and not, just spend the next 2 years with ultimate vengeance in my heart because of what somebody took from me and what they did and whatnot. So that was a really cool and clear message. As I posted on social media, the phrase that I heard repeated was Jesus curious. A lot of people seeing the display of what Christianity means to a lot of folks that were in attendance in Arizona, saying, what's this all about? Like, what you didn't see violence, or you didn't see rhetoric that was more to incite hatred in other people. It was a lot of Christian beliefs and ideals, and I thought that was super healthy to see what Christianity is really about. I think they represented the faith pretty well in that memorial. And I heard from pastors who said that people are showing up that haven't in a little while, because I think, first and foremost, when there's a threat to your own mortality, when you think about, your death and what could be taken from you, there's a lot of factors that are outside of human beings' control, and being right with where you think you should be. I mean, even in my own personal life, I'm thinking, do I spend too much time delving into, anger and where I'm not a violent person, but sometimes I'm not sad in spaces where I probably should be sadder. And, Kellen gives me a hard time all the time for being emotionally devoid. And I think I do spend a lot of time there. I'm a logically minded person, so I'm solving problems with mathematics, and maybe I need to connect a little bit more with, some of the emotional side. And it really is, the emotional peel over the last couple of weeks. Maybe I invest a little bit more in my own faith as well. So a lot of people warming up to that. Okay, so that's the memorial. Want to talk about some more of the national side of things. If you've seen the ICE raids in Chicago and the protesters that have shown up during these raids, again, this is one of those examples where I really was not sad. My definition of peaceful protesting might be a little different than some of you watching this right now. that when I picture peaceful protesters, think of people who grabbed a couple of signs, they stand on the sidewalk, they chant, they say some things, and they kind of just didn't affect any other people. Business went on around them. And then the new definition of peaceful protests are like, if I sit down and block your vehicle and stop you from proceeding. It might not be violent protests, but it wouldn't be peaceful either, because you're using a strategy and method that is holding some other person hostage. You're getting in the way of another person. And so, like, let's just say I get pulled over for speeding, and I go through the motions and I get in the way of a law enforcement's job. They're following the rules. I start not following the rules, and they put me in cuffs. Now I'm going to be mad about it, right? Because I put up a fight. I obstructed what that police officer was trying to accomplish. After the fact, when my emotions settle down, I can come to the conclusions that my behavior is what made something happen, right? If I would have sat there, I'd have gave him my license. I would have done what I was supposed to do. I wouldn't be in handcuffs and getting arrested. So the consequences of my actions is what led me to be in the back of a police car and in handcuffs. So when these ICE agents are leaving the facility in their vehicles, and you have peaceful protesters outside getting in the way of those vehicles, and then the ICE agents that are defending the vehicles, are throwing these people to the side, and they're not doing it delicately. They're not doing it with kick gloves, right? They're tossing these people away from the vehicle. So you're on the side of, they could have been more delicate, but same thing, law enforcement, you get pulled over. It's a direct response to your actions. You don't halfway feel bad for these people for getting thrown. There was a political candidate who was masked up and in front of the vehicles and blocking. ICE agent grabbed her around the waist. She started, kind of kicking and not going along with it. And she got tossed like a sack of potatoes to the side of the road. And it made headlines like, these ICE agents are so violent to these peaceful protesters. And I think that, I think that there, in that instance, it's hard to make that case that the protester wasn't equally as guilty as putting themselves in that predicament as the ICE agents. I mean, you can audit it. If let's just say that same lady wasn't blocking the vehicle, was up on the sidewalk screaming at ICE agents, would she have been tossed? And the answer is no. The ICE agents weren't going after the people who were peacefully assembled on the side. They were going after the people who were holding hostage that vehicle from pulling out of that detention facility. And there was a second video that was circulating as well. This robust woman, same thing, blocking the vehicle, and she got tossed pretty heartily over to the side as well. And I think it's going, I think you could take that too far, where, the pendulum is in the ICE agents where they're behaving with force that is above the situation. But I don't think that was the case here. But, the watchdogs need to keep a close eye on it, that if we get to be too aggressive, then, I would definitely be on the side of the headline. But in this case, the theme is definitely it's consequences time. Behaving badly is no longer a coddled action. Law enforcement's able to act within the law and behave the way that law enforcement acts, which is you get aggressive with them, they get aggressive with you, put you in your place, get you out of the way, and allow business to proceed. Now, one act, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on this, is the drug trade is being targeted as a terrorist organization. And in doing so, they can take some liberties of attacking a terrorist group. Whereas if it were just a law enforcement, if it was just regular criminals, it would have to go down differently. But just the declaration of a terrorist act, or a terrorist group, means that there could be a boat in international waters that are deemed transporting narcotics, and a drone can shoot a missile and take that boat out and kill everybody on board along with the narcotics. So I'm halfway paying attention to the criticism of, how do we know that those boats are loaded with terrorism? Is it, like when you see some place in the Sudan or somewhere in the Middle East, and we take out a truck that was traveling down a roadway, and the military and government says that, yeah, those are absolutely terrorists that were in there. Making that case and saying the certainty that those were terrorists against someone who were waging war with is different than these were just, regular people in a truck and they got caught in the crossfire where they thought they were terrorists. I have no problem with terrorists taken out. I also want to make sure that due diligence is adhered to, where we had a level of certainty that was close to 100% that was the case. So I think it's fair to question, those boats being taken out. And, some of the pushback on it was the type of boat, the range that the boat had, the people that were there, the certainty that there were narcotics on board. It really does matter to a objective observer to make sure that was absolutely the case, and we're not just capitalizing on, tolerating boats being blown up. So I'll absolutely listen to that criticism. Now, if it were the case, verified narco terrorists blew them out of the ocean, as a warning that trafficking in that method is not something we're going to tolerate. It's a big pushback against, the free, the free exchange of narcotics into this country, and how many lives are taken with our fellow citizens. Julie said, how do you appropriately protest the Gestapo? You have to make your case that it is the Gestapo and not just a dramatic, thing. I mean, think of it this way. If all you have to do is give someone a title in order to justify bad behavior, then you can absolutely take someone like me, charge them with one of those terms, and then do injury or violence against me, and then make the claim that I was that thing that you tagged me with. And the problem is that we so freely associate those terms with people, loosely associate, and then the public sees you say Gestapo or Nazi or authoritarian or racist or homophobe, use those for everybody, and then we're halfway questioning the seriousness of those terms. I want it to be that if you say Gestapo, I know what you mean, and you're serious about assigning that title before you do it. And then I'm like, yeah, if it's truly the Gestapo, then you do protest the Gestapo. But the problem is you bastardize those terms, and now they don't really mean anything. And the real outcome is the little boy who cried wolf. By the time you actually need that term to mean something, you jacked it up so much, and then you're outraged that somebody doesn't take that serious. You know how many times I see Charlie Kirk per day being called? I listen to him regularly. While I do my accounting work, I would have him in the background, and according to the left, he was a racist, homophobe, bigot, every name in the book. And I listen to him every day, and there was not a single instance where I said, well, I got to stop watching this dude. He's totally a bigot, a homophobe, Nazi bigot. And so, like, I listen that people want to express themselves with those kind of terms, but it hurts the case when you abuse those terms and use them when they're not appropriate. If every time you disagree with someone, all you do is give them hit them with one of those terms, it's just a slur. It's just an insult. It doesn't really mean what it should. It should carry weight. Those terms should carry weight, and they just don't anymore. So thank you, Julie, for that. 330-595-1600 if you want to call the program. And definitely we've seen this swing where law enforcement is getting back on what I think they should have done in the first place, not tolerating criminal behavior, cracking down on lawlessness, makes the rest of us who do follow the rules take that a little bit more serious. Like if you're the only one following the rules, when I get upset, I got to follow the same channels. And I see in cities where when you're upset, you block traffic. What if I just decided that I'm totally upset about something today? So I go on 680 and I sit in traffic and block. If it's just me sitting out there blocking traffic, do you think I'm going to be arrested in 32 seconds for putting my life in danger as well as the other people that are in danger? That's lawlessness. And I broke a rule that you don't sit in the middle of traffic. But when I see on the news, if I can get 5 or 6 of my buddies and hold some kind of banner that has some kind of sacred sign on it, then I have cops just watching it go down. And I'm thinking, look at all these people who are following the rules that are caught in your hostage situation. And there are people that are charged with enforcing the laws, watching that happen. Like, it blows my mind how we can tolerate that kind of lawlessness in the, to the effect of, depending on what message you carry. And I think that's a dangerous path when we bless and tolerate lawlessness. So if that lady wanted to not get thrown like a sack of potatoes, you get your ass up on the curb, you have your sign, you vocalize in any lawful way that you want, and that is the way that you have your voice be heard. And if no one's listening to you and nobody's doing anything about it, take it up the chain of custody, take it up to your local representatives, go through when we follow the rule, then the rules mean something. When you're not getting your way and you decide that the rules no longer apply to you, now we have anarchy, and nobody wants to live in a civilization that has tolerance for that anarchy behaviors. They are arresting and detaining citizens regularly. They are using unnecessary force. They are targeting kids, people in courts, processing their papers. They even arrested a guy in a hospital. What would you call it? What are the proper channels when someone abuses their authority and goes on overtop their authority? Do those channels exist? And they have a job to do. It's not the citizen's job to question that unless they have all of the information. So I would go point by point on anything you said and say, okay, I'll look one up. A guy comes out of the hospital and he's arrested and detained. I'll put that in my notes and I'll look to see what it is. Let's just say and I don't know that the details of that, but let's just say he was in the hospital, he got treated. So let's just say I'm in a traffic stop and I'm going to be arrested for outstanding warrants, and I get myself hurt. During the arrest, and then they send me to the hospital. You don't think they're going to handcuff me to the hospital bed, that after my treatment's done, that as soon as I walk out of that hospital, I'm going to be walked right into the back of a car? Just because you get hurt doesn't mean that the law stops being applied to you. And whereas, that's a contrast of this guy's injured and then he gets taken into custody, those two things aren't connected. Got treated for some kind of illness or had some kind of treatment done, and then as soon as he walks out of the hospital, the law starts applying. Even the guy that walked out of jail, he got a release date, and immediately he was picked up and put back in the car and on his way back to jail. Well, that's a gut punch. You tasted freedom for about 32 seconds before, when you get your freedom, the law starts applying to you. And if there are laws that you were broken that are prosecutable, if that's a word, able to be prosecuted, then you go right back in jail. And especially since a lot of these criminals assemble a lot of crime that is able to be prosecuted, then yeah, you're going to find yourself on that side of the law quite often. Jerry says the Gestapo was around 90 years ago. We keep going backwards. We tend to make history repeat itself versus change it in a positive way. And that is true. And I think there's a lot of people who read through history and they almost invent, because history gives us sort of this context of, we don't want it to repeat itself. We've been warned against it repeating itself. So when you see elements that lead towards the historically significant events, when you start seeing that evidence start to arise, you almost concoct that outcome and in your brain because you're afraid of it happening. Do I think that the the Trump administration is going to become a king since we've had kings, or on authoritarian, kill your opponents? Do I think they're going to use authoritarian rule and crush their opponents? I've seen elements of that right now, and the overall principle is when you get a big government and it has the ability to use the weapons of its positions of power to go after their enemies. I see that revealed in a ton of different forms. The Department of Justice shouldn't have went after people and assigned felonies to the current president. They shouldn't have gone after, the FCC shouldn't have gone after and leveraged a late night host to lose their job. They shouldn't wield any of those powers. So I'm not going to cherry pick one of them and say I'm most disgusted with this one. I'm going to say, okay, well, voters are need to have a healthy amount of suspicion that people who have, really thirsty and they are power hungry, that are going to lead with wielding the powers that are out their controls. The voters need to neuter those powers and make it so that those can't happen. Have lots of oversight, have lots of transparency, have lots of auditors, have lots of opposition that could stand in their way and do right by the citizens by keeping everybody honest. I don't see government as a proposition of, there are very few politicians that can come to mind who aren't sitting in front of the controls and use them for their own ends. And so if everybody's doing that, then the voters have to be like, all right, if we don't like authoritarian rule where the levers of government are waged at their enemies and, sort of use them to protect their friends, then that is a real problem. And if it manifests in this guy, then it's equally as likely that it's going to manifest in all of the politicians that have access to those levers. Jim says, interesting to see what the ratings were for yesterday for a non-sports event and directly in competition with Sunday sports. NFL football gets millions of viewers over the course of Sunday. So I'm wondering how many people switched over and watched it, as well as watching in 5 hours is a long time. And I know I watch 3 hours of football for my brownies every week, but 5 hours is a long time to hear speeches without any action. So I would be interested, but 300,000 people showing up for that event was very, it gives you all the feel goods that people were so behind Charlie Kirk and what he stood for and whatnot. So Scott says, hi Scott. And Julie says, we are blessing Homan for taking bribes. Trim traffic is rolling is great. That's interesting. I am paying attention to this because setting the stage on Tom Homan, there was, I believe, and again, I usually wait a good solid week, especially as stuff that comes out over the weekend before the news cycle truly starts hitting during the week. I'll wait to hear more details on what this is. If this is just the current Trump administration leader that is being gone after and taking a out of context element and applying it, then that's what I expect. But I'm open to seeing whether or not there was corruption within his and I believe this was back in the 2019 is when I think it was, and there was a $50,000, I'm not going to call it bribe because I don't know that. I'm going to call it a consultation fee in exchange for XYZ. So a government contract, whatever. So the elements that I see are somebody paid a government official $50,000, and did that person then give government contracts? If you can connect those to that circuit fully and say 50,000 equal to a government contract, then I'm with you right there. It should be something that should be investigated. But here are the elements. Number one, was it investigated, and was it something that could be prosecuted? Number two, was he given money and then gave positive anything to the person who gave them money? Because if it was just a Tom Homan paid $50,000 for consulting, no corruption on the other side, then it's a non-story. So, but I'll wait about a week before Tom Homan responds. The rest of the details of it, come through. But again, I have not decided whether or not I feel Tom Homan is a corrupt individual or not. Carter says, I will say it again and again, the left is outraged that we are following the law. Had Biden not allowed millions in the country, it would be a non-issue. I still can't believe that we allow states to be sanctuary cities, to literally take lawbreakers and giving them safe haven. I mean, it is one thing following the proper channels with saying, hey, we want to bring people in from a country, so let's actually create laws that allow that to be done. But to take somebody who actually broke a law, so you rob a bank, and then I say, well, I'm a bank robber, safe house, and just allow you to live with me, and somehow set up guards out in front to say, nope, no law enforcement in here. I'm my own government, and I'm, this is a sanctuary for bank robbers. I mean, that would never stand. So what allows a city to be able to give and insulate lawbreakers from the rest of society? And without, thankfully now we kind of know what cities are sanctuary cities, and I just keep my family away from pro-crime cities. And then so when these cities have more crime because of those people, and then they get my federal dollars to be able to mop up something that they created because of a bad experiment, that's just not fair to the absolute taxpayer. So I think these cities, I believe that states should have the right to run these little experiments, but I don't think that they should be getting federal support, so that if in Ohio I don't live in a sanctuary state, that any government money should go to places that are, then I have to pay the consequence when I can't vote there. I can't let it be, my disgust with it be known, but still we got to foot the bill for sending those states money to deal with the crime that they created by that bad experiment. Scott says, love Jimmy T. He was beloved. That's what I'll say. 2024 FBI handed him a bag of money. Yeah, and I'm going to look into it, Julie, and still that will be later in the week after more have this come in. And I can appreciate that you're quickly going to take that side, and I'm going to be a little bit more wait and see approach on it. So definitely hold up that information until we can talk about it with more information. I truly believe they'll have some kind of press release. Some spokesperson will give that part of the story. The transparency is something in this administration I think they're pretty good about. But first, and again, if it wasn't something that could be prosecuted when they investigated, and he was going to be part of that administration, why would, especially with as many liberal judges and how much liberal power was still during that administration, why they didn't, prosecute when they had a chance? The timing is a little suspect now, as far as because of how much time. I mean, you got to think of it. If the strategy was someone who's doing a lot of stuff and you're really displeased with what they're doing, taking that person out and ruining their credibility is a pretty good strategy if it sticks. So that's why I'm kind of questioning it, doing a wait and see. Business owners are also responsible for providing sanctuaries in the name of profit. What does that mean? Business owners are also responsible for providing sanctuaries in the name of profit. Law breaking? I don't think businesses are allowed to break the law. You have to reveal a little bit more about that. I'm not sure how businesses create a sanction. Are you talking about farming, like taking illegals in to pick stuff? That, I hold them just as responsible. I don't think any company should factor in illegal labor into a product that they then have access to the marketplace to be able to sell to consumers. And I think we've gotten really used to products being priced using child labor and illegal labor, even in other countries. I mean, as far as that international trade thing goes, American consumers are extremely responsible for misdeeds, right? If you knew with your iPhone or the technology that you use every day, how much illegal labor by American standards went into the products that we buy every day. $1,000 iPhone might cost $2,000 or $3,000 if it was made here and manufactured in the United States by people who are paying a $20 plus an hour wage to, and the consumer would be displeased with that. So we'll tolerate 8-year-olds working in a manufacturing plant so long that our iPhone is cheap, and I really disagree with that. So if you go to the grocery store and you can buy produce that is less than $1 because it was picked with illegal labor, That's an inauthentic price. I think that all companies should be dissuaded from using legal international labor that doesn't follow our standards, as well as stateside labor that is just done illegally. And I'm telling you, when they're taking contractors and they're taking support staff and they're taking agriculture labor off the table, there's going to be some pain while we factor in authentic labor into the pricing of those products. And I'm all for it. And I know consumers are going to screech about it because they really like their cheap pricing, even if people are being exploited. But I think we need to right that ship sooner rather than later. And I hope, and Julie, I'll agree with you that if agriculture is now at a huge disadvantage where they're closing up shop and not being able to do what they do for a living, and the government all of a sudden rescues them and gives them a free pass on that labor, and they don't do it everywhere, then again, it's legal channels. So can the government on its own go and create a special get out of jail free card to people who have still broken the law, but somehow pick those because they're needed in our marketplace, that somehow they then can skirt the law? And I don't believe in that. So so here's what I would do. Let's just say the realization is we're not going to have enough agriculture labor to pick our produce and to take care of our fields. Then don't take the ones that broke the law, offer that up to people who haven't yet broke the law and give them first crack at it. Because why would you give the advantage to the lawbreakers when there are people sitting on the sidelines that say, I want to come to America, I want to get in there legitimately, I'll pay the fees, I'll go through the naturalization or the application processes, go to them and give them first crack at it. I think this is a lazy version of that, where we're just now saying, yeah, you know what, law breaking yesterday, we were stern on that, but now we see that there's going to be downside to that. So all of a sudden we're going to say, okay, law breaking is less bad today than it was yesterday. So I'll take up your point. All right, looking back through some comments, let's see if I make sure I didn't miss anything here. No, didn't miss anything. Okay, cool. All right, moving on to the next topic. The Jimmy Kimmel stuff. So last week I was a little harder on the decisions that were being made with Jimmy Kimmel because my first crack at it was that, if we have a government agency leaning on, a host, is no different than Facebook and, Twitter at the time, sort of like taking unpopular or bias or political speech and taking certain people and using their ability to silence them makes me extremely uncomfortable. It happened with lots of conservative hosts. Anybody who spoke out against the COVID vaccine were throttled down and lessened their exposure, and sometimes outright suspended for the things that they said. And that made me feel uncomfortable as well. And so for the FCC, and it's bad optics, even if the stuff I'd rather it be done in front of us than behind the scenes, where the FCC did an interview. The FCC chairman, I think it was Mr. Carr, basically said we can do this the hard way or the easy way. And that part was cut out of the headline, and that makes me feel really uncomfortable, right? And if there's two sides of it in my brain, I think in cable news and broadcast media, it made me feel really uncomfortable when all of them were fed the same headline verbiage and they all repeated it the same way. That made me feel uncomfortable because that made me feel like it was orchestrated behind the scenes, where somebody was in control of a narrative and they used the apparatus of media to be able to get that narrative out, right? I have no problem with a news outlet that has an editor that decides to put together their programming. They write their own scripts and they write their own feeds, and it's true and truly an expression of the people that were there. So if Jimmy Kimmel was just operating as Jimmy Kimmel rather than being part of the apparatus, then I don't want the FCC going after an individual that's just expressing themselves. But if he's just part of an orchestrated narrative, then I 100% want to break up that narrative, and because it's just a megaphone for whoever's controlling those people. So it'd be more helpful for that FCC chairman to say, listen, what you're watching, the news, the cable news networks, the broadcast news networks, the entertainment, the movies, the music, wasn't really just a unbiased, unadulterated, expressive of that talent that's there. This is just a mouthpiece for something else, and we're looking to break up the money supply and the methods for communicating those messages to these outlets. I watch C-SPAN, right? And really, as far as the most unbiased network, the most boring network, because it's literally just the covering, the turning the microphone on and turning the camera on and letting the people on the stage do all of the talking, versus what you get on news networks, which is somebody that is telling the story of what you're seeing. And so there's a lot of trust that comes with the narrators of that story, where they're just going to tell you how they see it, versus three ways: either narrative control, where they're told what to say about it. Some of the time it's not necessarily what they say, is what they don't say. So if you see a protest, right, and there are protests on one side and protests on the other side, and you basically apply the same narrative on both sides. You point out the misbehavior on one, and you point out the good on the other. You point out the misbehavior on the other side and the good on the other side. That would be an unbiased approach. But let's just say you cover it with you go to one side and you just cast the bad behavior, and you go to the other side and you just cast the bad behavior. So the audience, the people that are watching it, get a skewed version of what went down. They're going to think the one side was just all behaving badly, and the other side was just all behaving, perfectly. And so the audience then gets a skewed version of it. And I think if you receive federal dollars and you're governed by the FCC, and the mission statement is that all FCC licenses are granted on providing things for the public good. The public good doesn't mean the liberal good, and the public good does not mean the conservative good. It means the whole good. And the public good of getting the true and proper happenings is the obligation of news sources that have an FCC license. If you don't want to be governed by the public good stipulation, then you start a cable private network, and you can do whatever you want. Take $0 from government, whether or not it's direct from the government or NGOs, and you can do whatever you want. You could say whatever you want based on the guidelines of the license that you hold, if it's not. So if, let's just say an affiliate with ABC wants to start a strictly non-broadcast wing and say whatever they want, pull whatever they want, that's following the rules. But carving out and making things that don't apply has been this last 10 years of my lifetime, is that nobody's following any of the rules and guidelines. Why even have the rules and guidelines if we're going to take some people and just give them carte blanche? You don't have to follow the rules while the rest of us do. And it's unfair to the rule followers, and it's exactly how you get to that anarchy state. Julie says, what's the status of the MLO boys? The last I heard, that they were still in talks with Meta to, for those of you who don't know the history here, so they released a photo that was redacted of faces. They got mass reported for having juveniles that were depicted in a photo, even if their faces were hidden. And they were under review whether or not that was a suspending offense. And Isaac was on the deal where probably shouldn't have posted that. Luke was on that deal where he's not going to be infringed. And so the fight continues to whether or not they're going to get their original page back. And they started a new one. They put a dot at the end. So if you want to look them up, the MLO Burrows dot period at the end. and they've begun again. And I'm sure that now they have sort of like a better bead on what the boundaries of what they can say and what the sensitivities are meta. I believe in what they're doing, because even with our show and what we do here, there are topics that we know that YouTube and Facebook have sensitivities to, and we use different verbiage so that we can kind of get around, because we're not using this stuff in the spirit of why the rules and guidelines were written. When there is an exploitation that happens, they create regulation that is meant to thwart that exploitation. We just happen to get caught in the net. We're not using it the way that the exploiters are, but we do get ended up in that net. So we have to use different words. We have to dance around certain topics because they'll throttle us and group us in with the people that are doing that. And something similar where they weren't using the exploitation of children to go after those children, because Facebook really hammers down where you don't mess with kids. And so you can see where if you put a picture that had kids, even with whatever, could end up in the harm of those children, it would not be a fair thing. So that's where we're at right now. There's not anything new. I don't think Sunday it got resolved, so I think they're going to come in here on Tuesday. They're going to use their Plan B site and continue. I don't know that even in what they were covering, which was the Ursuline, much more has happened. So it will probably be a footnote in their show. They'll give you an update better than I could have here. So thank you for that. Let's see, what else didn't we hit today? We did the Chicago deal. Trump took time during the memorial to say that there were going to be more cities, and Chicago was even going to be hit with those deportations and with those arrests and with that lawlessness. Pritzker has not invited the National Guard, which he will never in a million years do that invitation. But I think federal agents still can occupy. They can still do their arrests and deportations because of the federal authority that they hold in the state. But there's a limit. He can't extend into criminal behaviors that are managed by city law enforcement and state law enforcement. So that still, we'll see how far they can take it. I feel like if Trump can assemble a Washington, D.C. and a Memphis and maybe some other states where the National Guard had a truly good effect on crime in those cities, that I think the public pressure will be, the setup of authoritarian in nature. And now all of a sudden, comparing that to people being able to walk down the street without being robbed and carjackings happen and murders and whatever. I truly think that the public will be more inviting than the leadership. And if the public puts pressure on leadership to say, hey, let's let the National Guard do their thing in the same template that they did in DC and now in Memphis and then other cities that they might hit before that, there's got to be a lot of trust. And I think the narrative is we're not going to trust the federal authorities because it's connected to, a Nazi regime. And the public has right to feel a little skittish about inviting that into their city. They almost have faith that their governors and their mayors are pushing back against that. But if it's like, hey, they went into DC and that didn't fall in and become an authoritarian state, and Memphis did the same thing, maybe the public are like, okay, well, maybe you over dramatize that and it's not as bad as it was made out to be. But still, the healthy suspicion, remember, healthy suspicion, not blinded suspicion, where in the wake or in light of the truth that you're still pushing up against it. Push up against it. Keep them honest. Keep transparency happening. If you see one piece of evidence, real, legitimate, unbiased evidence that your federal government's pushing or going too far, then it's time to slam on the brakes, because that's one thing I know about giving any kind of blessing or power to the federal government. It's only a matter of time before they overstep it. So just like in term limits in Congress, or laws that have no, what's that called when sunsetting? The longer something is around, the more likely it is that a bad actor is going to take advantage of it and exploit it. Is really high. So if I was like, I'm going to bring the National Guard for 30 days to do this thing, and they clean it up and they leave, that would be an acknowledgement that we don't want it to go too far. If they're like, okay, we're going to bring the National Guard and we're going to stay here indefinitely, well, you might be okay in the beginning, but as time goes on and then you see that you're deregulated, somebody's going to take advantage of that doesn't have the spirit of why you're there in mind, and they're going to exploit. So sunsetting is a very important part of this, of this process. So thank you for that. 330-595-1600 if you want to call the program. Today is also the day where the RFK Jr. and the Make America Healthy Again are going to release connections of the cause of autism. And I've been paying attention. Last week, I decided to listen to the NIH call, right? And basically they assembled, I want to say 20 leaders in different departments, whether it be NIH or CDC, these experts that were talking about the connections to health because they're basically putting official policy together to then be distributed up the chain so that hospitals and schools know what the policy of the federal government is on these different deals. And this is where all the healthy debate happens, where you got experts in different fields that are hitting the sort of like the data and the sort of like the findings of different experiments that they've done and the data that they've collected, and they make an educated decision on what should the policy be. And it was a very healthy debate. There was one hang up that I had on the entire thing. A couple of the experts that were on this panel, they said the same thing. Why are we talking about this? Like, what's the origin of why we're questioning this? And I think from a scientific standpoint, that is probably the worst. That is sort of like the worst acknowledgement that a scientist pushing back and questioning why something is being questioned it leads into the skeptics like me who think that pseudoscience is more religion than it is science, where I want everything in science for the status quo to constantly be revisited, questioned, finding out if we have more data, right? And if you go through the data and go through the pushback and the debate, and you still arrive that the old way is still the best way, then it survived the scrutiny of questioning that science, right? And so for there to be three experts on that panel to say this shouldn't be questioned or why are we questioning says a lot about the motivation behind some of these panels, where I think we have a lot of non-scientists who are more in, or more zealots than they are science. Thankfully, those statements were dismissed pretty heartily by everything on that panel. And I don't want that to be effective countermeasure to questioning things in the science community. But to get back to my original point, the acetaminophen is what is likely going to be cited today in the early stages of pregnancy. Exposure to Tylenol or acetaminophen under certain circumstances where I not top of my head, where there's a low chemical that's in the body, exposure to acetaminophen can cause autism, is what I believe the release is going to be. And I think that's sort of like chemistry and science when it comes to the human body is a very difficult thing to craft policy for. It's because we have so many different people, and nothing that people's behaviors, what they're exposed to, environmental, nutrition and food and exercise, all of these things mean that every human being is so different than every other human being. So to take just a generalization and saying this is healthy or this is not healthy, like I could eat a cheeseburger tomorrow and I could get sick from it. Why? Because I don't have exposure to certain things that are in fast food, where if you have someone who eats fast food every single day, might not even freaking feel it, right? And so it's so important to have a medical professional that knows you and where you're at in your whether or not you're a super healthy person, and making different recommendations for the state of every person that's in front of you, instead of using a policy that applies to 350 million people and say X, Y is bad, versus having medical professionals that are equally knowledgeable in how the human body acts, as well as applying the differences and the data for those people. So let's just say you do testing. All the universities do different testing. And think of all the testing that would have to happen with all of the different variables that human beings are exposed to. You would have to have testing, double-blind, placebo testing for, let's just say, these 3 vaccines, and then those 3 vaccines with these 3 vaccines. When you start taking 70 vaccinations and finding out the different combinations of vaccinations that occur, how many different tests you would have to do. There's not there's not enough research dollars to put in enough sampling of testing to know all of the different combinations of people, environments, and chemicals, exposure to chemicals. So think about how hard that is. So then those researchers and experts have to take baskets of different types of people. And if you were to take someone who has no vaccinations, and you take someone who has all the vaccinations, and do studies within those groups. So you take the Amish, which gets no chemical exposures, and then you get the typical family who just says whatever the doctor tells them to do, they do, and they're hoping that those components are legit and good for them. And you take the health complications that are in those 2 groups. Well, it'd be very easy to say that have no, just taking that one subset, the exposure to chemical vaccines in those 2 different groups, taking the levels of ADHD and autism and cancers and whatever, and saying, well, look, they take no vaccines and look how healthy they are. Well, did you take into account how they get their water and how they procure their food, and the amount of exercise that they have, and the environmental factors of exposure to sun? No, you took one element when there are hundreds of them just within those 2 groups. And then you take people who have moderate amount of exercise and have, drink just natural foods and whatnot. And so it is nearly impossible to have a health policy that applies to everyone, where I, just as a consumer, know what category I am and what level of advice I should get from the research that's being done. And so if you take the medical doctor, who not only has to know how the human body works, but also has to know what data is applicable to their patients. So they have to be halfway physician and halfway research analyst, versus just taking what the CDC, taking one. I mean, does a doctor have enough time to be everything they need to be to give good health advice, versus taking generalizations and trying to apply it to the most amount of people to do the most good? That is not an easy job at this point. And I think those health professionals are overtaxed as it is. So they're blind. They're totally blind. And so where if you get a data point and a connection with acetaminophen, and it ends up being true under these circumstances, you tell all doctors to say, hey, if you do a blood test for this person and they're low in this, don't do acetaminophen. What percentage of autism did you take out of the equation versus all of the other combinations that are in different categories where autism still exists? And so it's going to be very difficult to both condemn this if it ends up being true, and it's also going to be hard to sort of like celebrate this if it also happens to be true, just because of how the human body and all of those variables in combination just giving out. I'm always really fascinated with how the human body can adapt through all of the poisonous and toxic things that we throw at it. Everything from what we consume to the air that we breathe, the things that we drink, how much battery that we do to our body, and it still figures out how to not make you die on a regular basis. But the health crisis and how many people are in a state where they're tortured by all of their decisions, only because they don't know how the human body works and how the connection is with the things that they're throwing at their body every single day. And so, yeah, this next era, through the use of AI and being able to weigh all of the different deals, where I have biometrics that I wear around that take into consideration things like my heart rate and oxygen concentration and all these other things. Hopefully, that AI and those wearables can take the place of a lot of the doctors who have those blind spots, those physicians that are supposed to look at your chart and be able to figure out what you need to do, versus just sliding you on more medications versus making different health choices. Think about it. Let's just say you're a doctor and you're like, I know how to make you healthy right now. The percentage chance that you're going to do what I tell you to do, because of it's going to be hard and it's going to be expensive, and you're going to have people on the other side of the debate saying that it's not going to work and it's irresponsible to even say those words. Like, the limited choices, how many fights do you want to have? Fighting to know the human body is well enough to be able to get advice, fighting to get enough research to make really good decisions to your patients, fighting the financial gains that you can get from just going to pharmaceuticals, and fighting the criticism for giving advice that someone's not going to take. I would not want to be a doctor at all with that headwind coming straight at me, where I can't. There are much easier professions than that, right? So if you just latch into CDC and give your pharmaceutical warnings and don't tell people to change lifestyle to get healthier, you can fly below the radar and just do status quo work and let everybody else take the barb. So I don't think the CDC, the NIH, I don't think any of these agencies are going to have an easy time with any of this. But I think this release today with Tylenol and acetaminophen is sort of like the beginning of sharing data. But I'm not going to call it dangerous, but I'm going to call it, I got to think of a good word here, because I think it's going to be wrought with. I don't think it's going to do as much good because of the pushback whatever they say today is going to have. It's going to foment the partisanship that's in this deal, where I'm an objective middle ground person. So whatever he says, I'm going to think and give him the benefit of the doubt that this isn't an anti anything, right? This is just data that they've collected. This is research that's been done, and it's a data point. I don't take acetaminophen anyway, because I heard of how hard those kinds of medications are on the liver, and I'd prefer that my liver not be taxed with those chemicals. So I try really hard, just my personal approach, to discover what's causing the pain and work on not letting the pain happen in the first place. I mean, my motto has been that, if you have a headache, it's not because you have a lack of acetaminophen or Advil in your body, right? So you're not righting some kind of chemical imbalance by putting much needed acetaminophen in your body. There's something else, and all you got to do is, take responsibility for your actions, figure out what's causing the deal, do your own experimentation to make your health and how you feel and your pain better or worse, and do less of the things that make it worse and do more of the things that make it better. And that's how I've been governed. I eliminate the variables, the things that I don't need. I know what I need. All of you else know what you need, right? You need water. You need certain minerals. You need certain vitamins. You need certain protein in your diet, and that's it. So start there and just do the basics. See how you feel. Do it for a little while before you start adding all the unneeded things like alcohol, like smoking, like sugary things, and things that are absolutely bad for you, especially if you're in a health crisis. My first stop, if I was in a health crisis right now, it would not be what chemicals I need to offset those things. It would be to figure out what's causing them in the first place and trying to do less of them. Thank you, sir. And I say all. What I need is most people. There's sort of suggestions that you're on a bad health deal, whether or not your sleep starts suffering, or you start getting aches and pains, or you start having heavy breathing, can't do exercise that puts friction or stress on your body. And those are the calling cards of, okay, I'm sitting around too often, or I'm not eating the right stuff, and whatnot. So again, this is first steps in what I think the Make America Healthy Again. And I feel like this is all going to be really low hanging fruit and advising you on stuff that you really know. There's not going to be a lot of pushback, but I think this is the first one that we are going to see, a little bit of pushback. So how are we feeling out there today? You feeling good after this weekend that we didn't have any kind of real disasters to talk about on Monday? You saw a little bit of religious revival. We saw a little bit of patriotism and flags going around town. We saw speakers before events happening really tell people to encourage the behaviors that make you feel good about what your country stands for. I say all the time that I really, really, really love my country, and I really, really, really despise my government. And those two things are not the same. And the bad behaviors that you've associated with your country, what does it stand for? What should we be proud of? Is the rest of us regular people who aren't bought into our tribe, that we get to break away from, either celebrating or criticizing what our country stands for. And I'm very proud of the people of our country. When we really get down to brass tacks, when we really get down to a big chaotic event like 9/11, like terrorist attacks, like the killing of Charlie Kirk, and you watch individuals say, all right, I'm done with the bullshit for a little bit. This is who we really are. And they just go internal. They take care of their family first, their connection with their spirituality, their neighbors, family, and friends. And then they assemble the 100 of the most people that they care about the most, and they experience what's truly important about those things. You don't really even have time to deal about what the governor of, Illinois is doing, or the governor of California is doing. There's no time to really get mad about someone who doesn't even know you or you don't know them. And you're like, hey, my energy spent about getting outraged by something that I am so loosely connected with, it's not even funny. And so I always, when things get tough, you sort of take if you take a bullseye, right? And you say the most important things in the middle, who's in that middle? Put 100% of your time and attention to make sure your bullseye is really strong, really healthy. And so you go into protecting yourself and your family first. Am I as healthy as I can be? Is my family as healthy as it can be? If I'm expensing anything, any kind of energy, I'm making sure those things are right. Then as soon as your core is healthy, then you move out one layer outside of that. And you make sure that your family and your neighbors are protected. You are going to find that a lot of people are withering in their core components because they're expending their energy on people who don't even care about them, right? And so it's a slap in the face when you're spending energy concerned about someone who's not you, and those people aren't getting any of your attention. So that would be my recommendation: is take that serious in the people that you actually care about. And I'm very proud of the people that were at the Trumbull County Fair, who celebrated each other and the ties that they have with their country, and the people that they feel that they're embarrassed of their country right now have a obligation to fix those things and to create a country that they are proud of. And when you go through and you sort of like reflect and you are honest about what you're outraged about, some of those things, when you wash away the partisan angle on most of them, I bet you're a little bit more proud of what our country really does stand for, even if your narrative or your rhetoric says that you're a little embarrassed. So, and you will find, like Julie and I, we agree on a lot of things. I can guarantee you, when we start thinking about our core beliefs, I bet you it's very similar about the people that we would protect, and the people who are really important to us are pretty much the same. Going, and those of you who watch the show, and we talk about our political persuasions. I took one of those political spectrum tests, and it's basically about, I would say, 40 questions about what you feel is important, and you rate like agree, disagree, totally, or strongly disagree, strongly agree, and through a series of questions you get plotted on this gradient of authoritarian, and I think authoritarian's at the top, and then liberal versus conservative, and libertarian is on the bottom. And so I was plotted pretty much central. And some of my beliefs are actually plotted me a couple degrees left of center. So if you take the dead center, where you have as vanilla as you could possibly get, I am 2 degrees towards the libertarian side and 1 degree towards the left side, because my principle is people first, right? The individual people, not the grouped people, but the individual. So I care much more. If I'm going to err on any side, if it's going to be the institution or the person, I'm going for the institution. Where it differs is that I think it should be people, individuals, helping people, individuals, not institutions taking the place of the responsibility of the person. So if somebody said, hey, do you think somebody should be happy or sad? All of us can agree happy is the better choice, right? And if you think somebody should be given welfare, okay, versus somebody being helped by somebody in their community, I'm going to go someone helped in their community rather than be giving a check, only because I don't trust the institution. I trust the person. It works on both sides, where I also trust the person to be helped above helping the institution. And I think that's where I differ is people are always going to come first. And you can't make the argument to me that the government is the best helper that there is for the person. So you can have both be true at the same time. I don't think people should get welfare checks. And I do think every person should be helped by another person. I think the institutions need to give the money back to the people and say, you have $100 that I didn't take from you, go help some people. And then those people go out in community. And like I said, I think even if people right now have been replaced by government, where are you more likely to give to a charity that does something on your behalf than you taking that $50 donation and personally going out and helping that person? Well, when you aggregate individuals, right, by the thousands, can individuals have bigger steps to help people than giving $50 to a charity that has overhead where only 25% of the money goes down to the individual? Yes, but we got so comfortable outsourcing our charity to other people. Now, if you got a net gain, I could totally make the argument where I do $50 worth of good and it isn't quite as good as the $50 that go to XYZ charity, then you can make that argument and say, give it to the charity all day long, because look at the net gain you get from giving it to them because they just do it better. But if that fuels apathy, where we're so disconnected from the charitable event, then we think charity is giving money to other people so that they can do good. And I do not agree with that. We agree 100% on loving this country and hate the government. I have until recently been proud of my country and want that back. And absolutely. And I think everybody, you are the bulldogs. And I think you have a strict responsibility when the other power takes possession of the levers of government, that you have to be critical and question every motive. You have to question every action and make sure you keep them honest, because I think both sides will misbehave when they're in power. And the only thing that keeps them honest is that pushback. That is the healthy part of it. I think, though, that Julie, that you can go too far in that pushback and push back in spite of the details and data. You and I can agree on something that you're afraid of happening versus something that you know is happening. I think liberals take some rhetorical liberties and being able to cast something they're afraid of happening as stuff that is happening. And that's only really where we differ. So if you use language with me that said, I want to make sure Trump does not become XYZ, I'm in agreement with you, and I think you should push back to make sure that doesn't happen. It's only when you say, I think Trump is that you have to plead your case, and I'm not regularly convinced that that's your true feeling that is the actual case. and again, using the rhetorical language that should be reserved for actual absolutes, and using it as insults or taking a chunk out of someone's credibility is where we would differ. And I applied that just the same thing in science. I don't think science should ever use absolutes. I don't think people who study any kind of scientific pursuits, not just in human physiology or pharmaceuticals or whatever, I get so afraid when people who I don't even say absolutes. You know what an absolute to me is? 100% certainty. I never use absolute statements unless it has to do with absolute certainty. So if you're dealing with something that has a high probability, then I say high probability. I don't say absolute. So whenever someone with an expertise starts talking like that, I don't tune them out, but I question whether or not they are true to the process and aren't just zealots and religious. This isn't just a religious sect. So if you come at me with environmental things and somebody says, we are killing the environment, that's an absolute statement. If you said, we are doing things that are contributing negatively to XYZ, then that's someone who takes themselves very serious and they know a lot of things, and I'll listen to it. If you go into the woods and you leave litter, you have contributed negatively there versus going into the woods and picking up your stuff and not littering. That is a detailed oriented criticism that I will listen to. But if you just across the board generalizations that human beings without the who are doing bad things and killing the environment, I don't know. It has less resolution than I would like to have a debate about. And you will find that I am more of an environmentalist than some of these zealots are. I do think that, do you want to be enjoying the outdoors when it's uninhabitable? And if you make a campsite and you make it toxic and poisonous for yourself and you have to wade in your own toxics and poisons, okay, well, I don't either. And so let's find people who are making things toxic and poison and apply it to them on an individual basis. I try to be as considerate and not leave my trash, and this is metaphorical trash, for other people. And it's unfair that other people have to pay a price for my decisions. And that is an actual principle where I think a lot of individuals should adopt. But the environmental movement just ends up being a weapon to go after people that aren't you and willing to sacrifice other people's livelihoods and prosperity because you invented a new religion to be able to scalp them and take some of their wealth. Let's see. Carter says, were you proud of the public out of were you proud of the pullout of Afghanistan? Were you proud of your country's immigration laws were being ignored? Proud when the Justice Department was used trying to bring the president down, a candidate for presidency? It works. Let's see. It works both ways. And I felt the way you do now when Biden was president. And that's an important point, and not the details of this, but because we are all different people and we come from different positions. Sometimes the language that we speak, we are saying the exact same thing, but it's resonating differently on the ears of the person that you're talking to. We project and think that since we're all human beings wearing this meat suit, we all look very similar, that we process information the same way. What that does, until someone like me tells you that these different people need to be able to conquer, different disciplines and different problems without acknowledging that their skill set and how they process information is actually an asset to them and not something that needs to be diminished. So let's just say we were building a house, and husband and wives sort of like, this is probably the best example that I could think of. So husbands and wives, you have husbands that are built biologically to be more logical, and you have women who are built to be more emotional. They are going to see the world in how things operate and function versus how they make you feel and how they are expressed, right? So when you bring them into decorating a house, right, if one is given complete power, what's going to happen? They are going to build things that are functionally look terrible and make you feel bad, right? So you would have to overcome the aesthetics of what you're doing, and you'd have to be just washed over how functional this thing is. And then if you just did everything for looks and aesthetics and you didn't worry about the function, you'd have to be washed over with how it makes you feel and have to get over the fact that it doesn't function well. But when you take these two different things, people that and use them for their prowess, how they're actually processing information, and you give an acknowledgement that, hey, honey, you're gonna be in charge of the things that matter with expressing. I'm going to be worried about the function and how things work. I'm going to be able to make some concessions to you so that you may get made whole, and you're going to make some concessions to me where I'm going to make things. I'm going to be made more whole with how things function, and I'm not going to get everything I want, and you're not going to get everything you want. But in the end, right, we were both brought to the table, and things that were most important to me in my in the merit of my skill set. Now we have a home that has both of us, the fingerprints of both of us on there. We conquered a problem where nobody got their full way. We made concessions, and we made an environment. Not that we're exceedingly happy that we won and we conquered the person in our living quarters, right? Now everything around us has both of us and all of what we're good at built into everything. But politically, it's all or nothing. A win for one side is a loss for the other side, and there's no consideration between the two where I want to take a little piece of what you're good at and build it in. So when we travel, right, there's going to be places where if I was given my way, it would be less enjoyable because it would be 100% efficient and functioning, but it had no other emotional appeals. And if I did a test one time, and I used to take staffing to football games, baseball games on a Friday night and whatever. And it was a logical pursuit for me. I knew how much it cost, when we had to be there, what time we had to leave, what snacks we were picking out, when the tailgating was happening, and blah, 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 blah. And it was less enjoyable than if it was like, hey, we're going to go someplace and we're going to have a good time. And when somebody pointed out the fact that I was making it less enjoyable than I could have, I was like, well, I'm going to be a dick about it. I'm going to not do any of this stuff. I'm not going to know what time. I'm not going to know the tailgate times. I'm not going to know when we have to leave. I'm not going to know the snacks. I'm just going to let it up to chance. So I was like, experiment off. You guys are in charge. And was it as enjoyable as when I did it? I was like, look at this cluster F that everything happened. We didn't have the food we need. We had to eat some raw stuff because there wasn't, the person was supposed to bring the cooking materials, didn't happen. We were 15 minutes late for the game, and we had to deal with traffic, and it was a cluster. So for me, I was like, haha, I bet you guys did enjoy yourself. And those people that wanted the enjoyment out of having logic, they had a great freaking time. I was freaking miserable. But all I did was point out if it swung in one direction and it was all logical and went well, it wasn't enjoyable to some of those people. So I was depriving them of the enjoyment that would have made it an exceptional experience to them. And then if we went the other route where there was no logical involvement, I was freaking miserable because the whole time I couldn't go over how much of a cluster F this was and how much better it could have been if Logical Boy was just involved more. And so that is where we're at politically. And I think that the Julies of the world and the Joes of the world can solve these problems where I'm not afraid to let Julie win a little bit, and Julie's not afraid to let me win a little bit, so that we can get out of what we see to be proud of by the thing that we're doing. And I think that's really important. Julie says, I've always been a student of history. I research everything. I've always watched what's going on behind the scenes in government. I feel pretty grounded in my beliefs. Yes, and you might be right. I have a lot of trust with people who take it upon themselves to get a really good context of his history. Couple that with the honesty that the data that you're picking out, everybody wants to be right. And making fair predictions, things that are grounded in some fact, and making a prediction about something you know is going to happen. The second part of that is that you have to be a person that's right a lot. Okay, so if you had a guy who's picking sports betting and his ratio of wins was like 80% of the time, when he makes a prediction, you you go along with it because he's right a lot. So if you look at a historical context and you factor it in as making a prediction, like if you thought the Mayans predicted the end of the world, and you were like, dude, October 12th, 2020, the world's going to end. Historical context, I look through the literature, the people who said this is the signs, they all agree. This is consensus. A lot of people say that I'm predicting it's going to be the end of the world. I would look at it and say, okay, we got history. We got some experts that are built in. You just made a prediction. I don't know that it's not going to happen. I don't know that it's going to happen, but you said so. You're grounded in that belief, right? And I'll halfway go along. I'm not quite bought into that. You know what you're talking about? Well, let's see. Did it happen? And you get on the other end of it not happening, and you're like, okay, I have a lot of appreciation for the history that you baked into this and the experts that you baked into it, but you're kind of wrong. And that kind of matters when following a prediction versus saying just giving the details without the prediction. This guy did this and it led to this and the connecting factors got it to this point. Draw your own conclusions. That would be a really different story to tell. But I think we jump to a conclusion that is not as grounded as your belief. And I think we go a little bit too far in getting other people that don't have the historical context that you do go along with you, and they kind of get embarrassed after they followed, mindlessly into that. William says, are the "he is dead yet" button passed it out? Yeah, in quotes, "he is dead" button passed out at Ashland County Fair by the Democrats for dog whistle for killing Trump or free press, freedom of press. With all that attempts on Trump's life, I call it a threat. I think it's bad judgment. And if you didn't have a rash of violence and assassination attempts, that it would probably just be like, I don't know if you've been to like a county fair or a tourist attraction, and you see the t-shirts that people make that have brandishing sort of like the testosterone laden messaging. It's pretty overt that there's a lot of in bad taste humor that's being presented on t-shirts and buttons anyway. Looking on the bumper stickers of any car, you can see people have lost the embarrassment of going beyond. And I cite it as the Britney Spears effect, right? When somebody says something that's a little outlandish and a little cutting edge, a little bit beyond the line, people pay attention to them. And the further we go and more that then beyond the line becomes overdone, somebody's has to step 1 foot further than that line. So the Britney Spears, you have to keep outdoing yourself and saying the most outlandish stuff. It's part of human nature. It's what we do to be able to, and you couple that with social media, and the people who get paid attention the most are the ones that are either completely outrageous or, sometimes completely brilliant, but it's mostly drawing attention to yourself by saying outrageous things. You're going to have more of that. So do I think it was a call to action dog whistle? I don't think we're smart enough. I think you're just going to see the most outrageous thing and want to say it. And as long as it's tolerated and more people do it, it gets to be accepted. It's only now till something happens that we say it's in bad taste and people back off a little bit. Again, but to see an institution like the Republicans doing in bad taste or the Democrats, you gotta affix blame on the people that voted for less than honorable people. I do not think that Trump is this, honorable representation of what I think government should be. And as soon as we took the gloves off and put a Vince McMahon in charge of things to make it outrageous and outlandish, what do you think is going to happen? People are paying attention and won't even listen to you. You'll get diffused out by saying normal, intellectual things, and the more outrageous you say, the more people write your headlines. So that's just sort of like a sacrifice we made to the altar of having an outrageous president saying outrageous things on a regular basis and making it so that that outrage is just status quo now. So no, I don't think it's a dog whistle. I just think it's in bad taste, and I think there's a lot of in bad taste people. So this is what I want you to do. Individuals, I want you to be honorable. I want you to do things that are in good taste, that represent you, the best of you, and the best of other people, and support people who play an honest game, that don't try to be outlandish and don't try to be outrageous, and don't pay attention to those things. But I know you won't, and this is just it will escalate until we no longer can be proud of how people go out in public and say certain things in public and wear a certain shirt in public. What we're willing to do to capture attention is, I don't know, a little embarrassing on its own. Julie says, do you have your rapture plans made for Tuesday? Is the rapture really? Oh, right. Okay. She's making fun of the Mayan thing. I will tell you this, and so many people that I've talked to over the last couple of weeks that are just convinced that this is the end of times, that this is, what we were warned at in Sunday school, that the devil is present, the evil is prominent, and, this is the end. And you know what? I would say, and again, I think the minority sounds very loud, but I don't think that they are the majority. And I think it feels bad because we give so much prominence. So this weekend we did the Charlie Kirk thing. There wasn't any kind of violence. It was all great messaging, majority great messaging. And that's going to resonate. That is going to give energy to people believing in their faith and higher power, and maybe you get more people that were apathetic before start doing better things in the world, and it kind of gives energy to the other side. So I hope it's a rubber band where there was evilness and it took chaos in order to get evilness to snap back, and maybe we go off, the pendulum swings, happens in the other direction. But no, Julie, I don't think it's the end of the world yet. I did find myself apologizing to my kid because I do the dad thing on a regular basis, and I use the, when I was a kid, this is what we did, and I thought it was more natural and healthy, and I found ways to give him the same kind of experience and just in more modern ways. But man, he's going to contemplate things that I never had to contemplate at 15-year-old. He's going to deal with pressures that I never had to deal with as a 15-year-old. He didn't get to stay naive into his later teenage years. He got to have exposure to things like, think about, when was the first time that you got to see a dead body or somebody being killed? And I think in my experience, I was probably close to 18 years old, and I was at a sleepover, and somebody put in this VHS tape, and I don't remember what it was called. It was something about dead. It was something, and it basically was a compilation of people being murdered, right? And I walked into the room and they were watching that, and I watched this sits with me freaking forever. It was shortly after a car crash, and there were 3 people that were ejected from the car, and their bodies were on the street, and they were still like twitching and convulsing. And so it wasn't blood or gore. I mean, it was scrapes and whatever. But to just watch another human being on their way out, like, traumatized me in that moment. I can never get that picture out of my brain. It was the first time that I've ever witnessed death. Faces of Death. That's what it was called. Thank you for that. So Faces of Death. I couldn't get that image out of my head. And I went a long stretch with really avoiding seeing lives being ended. Now you hear about it, statistics, news articles, whatever, but you don't really get to see that violent behavior that ends someone's life. And then in a span of like 10 days, I watched video of someone's knife getting punctured into someone's neck on a subway, and I watched a video of someone's neck being blown out in the course of 10 days. So if I saw it and it was equally as traumatic as when I saw that Faces of Death deal, and you have most kids, if they're on social media, have already seen that violent behavior. And so those bodies and brains have changed irreparably, when you got to think the brain isn't done cooking until someone's in their mid-20s. And so the way those neurons are firing and those synapses are hitting, you just got exposure to something that kids are not supposed. I do not believe kids are supposed to be exposed to that when their brains are developing. They're supposed to be on a different track, survival, and figuring out what their principles are, and figuring out how they want to orient themselves, and learning about histories. They're not supposed to be contemplating going to school and dealing with somebody doing a school shooting, right? Did you when you were at school? Did you ever think that somebody was going to come into school with a gun? No, I didn't. Not a single time. Like, the worst we ever had to deal with was getting under a desk and tornado warnings and fire drills and whatever, conditioning to something that was going, it never occurred, and it was very unlikely to occur, but we were prepared and ready for it. Now you have kindergartners that have to go through active school shooter drills in kindergarten, thinking that another human being could come into the room and their teacher would have to protect them from someone who wanted to kill innocent kids. Like, it blows my mind how their brains are going to have to adapt through what society is putting them through. And again, I had to apologize to my kid that instead of where my brain was developing and getting the curiosities that I have, like, his curiosities are going to be completely different. Human beings are going to be completely different in the future than I am now. So I hope that I am teaching him and instilling him in the things he's actually going to need in the world that's 10 years from now, rather than how things were when I came into adulthood. And that's a stress and pressure that I can't wrap my brain around, honestly. Let's see. Carter said, we saw JFK getting killed as fourth graders from the Zuber film. I don't know what that is, but I never saw the actual assassination. I saw him riding in a car. I saw the part where he was slumped over. I never saw the actual hit. It was always cut at, because I think media saved us from having those grotesque frames in there. And I think that did human psychology a little good, where we didn't exposure. But, I even thought, what was the first video game that something that looked like a loss of life? You saw, when in video games, you would shoot somebody and they would disappear from the screen. You didn't have blood spatter and whatever. But then you got to a point in my 20s where video games started to be ultra realistic, and kids got really used to seeing loss of life and just associating it with respawn points and whatnot. So we changed a whole lot of things, and probably not for the better. Julie says, when I was 8, when JFK was assassinated, I remember every moment of it. I think that started my political journey. Did they show the actual strike, or did they just show, like I depicted there, that it was the slumped over? And then Carter said he filmed it. We saw the actual hit. Yeah, that would have done. I don't know if I can't see stuff like that. I really can't. I just have this. I put myself in the shoes of other people, and so to be killed, right, is one thing, but then to experience someone that you cared about, someone's son or daughter being killed, it's just something that I don't know if I'm grappling with my own mortality. It's just such a hard thing for me to hit. So public violence like that, I can't get accustomed to it. I won't get used to it. I don't think it's natural, healthy. But I do feel bad for the kids who aren't really taken aback. I mean, even these protesters, I think an embarrassment is how callous people are for injury or death from people that they disagree with. And I think that was the big message with Charlie Kirk and the people who got dismissed from their jobs for being those callous people. Are they broken? Are they evil? Are they just different in how they're processing it? Do they not put themselves and view other people as human beings like they are? Because of the words we use to describe other people, we dehumanize them. Have we taken, because of abortion, the ability to take human beings and make them into a clump of cells, and those clump of cells carry into other dehumanized people, and we've lost that connection with other human beings? I don't know. It's a very unhealthy way to look at human beings. I've always said that life is really precious already. You have a very limited time. So human beings should have sort of like a ingrained portion of us that say it's already limited to begin with. Let's help people extend it as long as possible, not think of thousands of different ways of taking happiness away from people and their life away from other people because they're not like us. And I don't know, that's just, again, my personal beliefs. Julie said, yes, I remember the blood and gore over Jackie's pink suit. My dad was a history teacher, and part of our upbringing was to watch the history being made. Yeah. And maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm a little off, and maybe I should have exposure so I'd be like everybody else right now, but I just can't do it. It's not even like a weak stomach. This is all mental for me. I think the worst part of the subway stabbing wasn't the actual blood and the stabbing, was when she turned her head and looked up and how like innocent she looked at. Like, how many times do you walk around and you're in an innocent position where you're trusting the people that are around you not to do something? It makes me not want to be in public if I am surrounded. I want to identify who the people were that are around us so that I can stay away from them. I want them nowhere near us. And so you can see why it makes me clearly uncomfortable with having people that are playing from a different rule book who are a little desensitized to taking other people's lives on the same street as me while I'm walking, and trusting that those people aren't going to take it upon themselves to end me while I'm walking around. Because I don't want that. And I don't want you to be walking around in close proximity. Send you off to Danger Island where you think it's cool to kill other people. Be on Danger Island with people who think the same way. And, if you would be really good at Hunger Games when it meant taking someone else's life, if you know that you're eager and will look forward to it and you'd be really good at it, I want you separated from the rest of us who think, man, I would probably not do well in Hunger Games because it meant that I'd have to take someone's life, and I just don't think I could do that. That's the state of mind I want surrounded by me. You people are dangerous. Some of you are out there are dangerous. Dead on with kids today actually being at a point of growing up seeing things that are 10 years older than we were growing up. This is very little today to shield the gross appearances. In the past, there was shielding, and maybe that shielding helped eliminate the excess bad that people now take on. No more remorse for doing these acts. Yeah, if you were shielded from it and you never saw it, it wasn't in video games, then when you're most impulsive when you're a kid, again, your brain's developing, you're at an emotional disadvantage with the chemicals that are forming what your brain is, and then you're given an option to end your struggle. So let's just say, as a kid, I was bullied, right? Never once when someone was mean to me, I thought, well, I'll just kill him, because I never saw people killing other people. I maybe heard about it in wars, but I never saw it in the news, and I never saw it with other people. It was just not part of even one of the options. And so like when I got mad at someone, maybe I thought in my head, I wish I could punch them in the face, right? And then maybe that would end it, where I'd stand up for myself and take vengeance in the form of violence, but punching someone in the face. Now, let's just say I'm a 13-year-old getting bullied, and brass knuckles or a gun or killing someone is an option. My forming brain might have kicked that up to my conscious brain and said, go do that one. Look how prevalent. That's how you end disagreements, is ruin people and take their life from it. Like, I think that's where that escalation. I think Jerry's absolutely right. I think innocence is still pretty important when, at least to 25. I think I could have handled it at 25 because I was already certain who I was. My identity was already forged. I already knew all the morals and ethics that I needed to wield in the world. I had a good relationship with. But when I was 13, I just don't know that I was a complete enough human being that I could have known what to do with that information. So William said, do you think the stabbing of the young girl on the rail in Charlotte was a racial crime? I don't. I think it was more of, yes, there was a racial element, but I think that it was a disregard for human life more than anything. So let me put it in three portions. You have people right now that are both homicidally insane. and need to be institutionalized. They need to be they're dangerously insane. And there's no, like, what if if someone was walking down the street right now and clearly reasonable people said, wow, that person is not right. Where do those people go? Who comes and collects them and gets them off of the street? Homelessness, drug abuse, trauma, all of those things collected together. You could easily identify someone who's not quite all there, and they're walking amongst you. So basically you have opportunity, you have reasonable law followers with homicidal, insane people that are together. So now you take, that's the foundation of it. So if you're mad and you have an impulsive, the behaviors that go along with being insane need to manifest. Let's just say you're mad about not getting your fix, or you hate white people, or you're mad about your sports team losing. Now you have the expression of those. So now you're around all those other people, and it's just a matter of time before you get mad about something. And then in this case, it was something about race, where all of a sudden in the insane person's brain, they all of a sudden have something against white people. Now you grab a weapon and you kill a white person, and you jaunt off saying, I got the white person, I got the white person. And so all of us have really bad thoughts that pass into our heads, and we dispel them, and we act on better judgments that make sure that we don't express those things. So we got insane people that are surrounded by us with a lot of rhetoric that inspires bad behavior. And then we have an expression of that where you take it out in real world, like you see on TV, and we have tolerance of it. Or like I said at the beginning, we have just a minimize, like you would want everybody to have empathy to not take someone's life. That is like the ultimate bad expression. It's the most evil thing, to kill another person, especially without justification. But you add those three elements up, where dehumanizing, expression of some kind of anger from a crazy homicidal person. And I'm not going to say that will be the last one, because today, foundationally, you are surrounded by insane homicidal people that all it's going to take is for that person to get mad about something and express it in public to complete innocence. So Carter says, excellent show today, Joe. Thank you. Thank you, Carter, for always being and supporting the program. Julie says, having seen what I did at a young age made me realize how precious life is and how each life affects many others. My empathy kicks in high gear. In some people, I'm sure that is exactly right, appealing to it. But I think when I see it, it scares the crap out of me that other people don't see that, and they're homicidal, insane people walking around that are even capable of that. I love the bubble. I love projecting, thinking that there's good nature in everybody, and all the rest of us have an obligation to help those people see their good nature and express themselves in that good way. But I just think that there's so many bad people that are using those bad-natured people as proxy to do out their bidding. So the school shooters are getting that dog whistles, and they're doing that on purpose. But these are both part of the bad people group. I would never in a million years, no matter how much I disagreed with you or hated you, that I want bad stuff to happen to you. I would not cheer it on. I would not want to see you in any kind of pain. But I know I have that in me, because listen, when I sent my team out to the grocery store to not follow any logic, to do it from just an emotional side, there was a part in me that wanted to be justified, that wanted to go so horribly wrong from them, so they would see just how horrible their beliefs led them. And that way, that would basically confirm my beliefs that my way is better than yours. And in the end, it was a great experience from them, and they never had that eureka moment. They never changed their beliefs. But somehow we think that if they have a bad time and they're tortured, and we're hoping for that bad time, that somehow our biases would be confirmed. And that's just, like I said, that life lesson that you have to have those experiences to say, oh, you know what? Let's let people go through their existence, how they feel, so long that they don't harm other people, that they don't express it by getting into someone else's bubble and making them worse off because of it, and maybe even lose their life. Julie says there were guardrails in society back then. Where did they go and why? What do you think those guardrails were? I think we still have sort of the luxury, the symptom of having a very religious nation where we had the controls that what the religious institutions instilled in people. And you got to think a lot of weak-willed, weak-minded people went to religion for their security, and they were disabled from acting on their impulses because they were bought into those religious. I'm not saying all religious people, but I think a lot of dangerous people were neutered because of their attraction to the religious element. On the other side, I think a lot of weak-minded people also behave badly because of religious institutions too. So that's not a guardrail that was 100% effective. Now, the second thing, guardrail, I think the lack of information and ability was actually a good thing. Almost like the gatekeepers of information on sort of like a theoretic level. You're like, okay, well, we kept information like how to build a bomb away from people who would build bombs. It was hard to get that information, and you had to earn into that information. And a bomb person is not going to go through the process of getting access to the information to build a bomb. And then we were like, okay, let's just give information to all people. Well, what's good about that? The information age meant that there was not a single document that was hidden from you. Anything you wanted to know how to do, there it is right there. So the upside is you got a lot of people that were deprived of information that could become simply because of the access to information. Now they have the information to become, but now we also gave the information to the bomb makers, and the bad people then had access to the utility that even make their bad nature into something that was more noticeable in the rest of civilization. So I think both of those institutions, gatekeeping information and sort of like the underpinnings of religious principles in culture, were once very effective and now are on the other side of that, where we need to introduce new ones. I was listening to a podcast the other day about instituting the 10 Commandments in classrooms, right? And I thought, okay, well, I think that's a fairly good idea. I don't think just because you're religious in nature, there are very few of those commandments that anybody who's reasonable can disagree with. Okay, should you steal from your neighbor? Reasonable people could say, no, you shouldn't steal from your neighbor. Nobody would want to be stolen from, so nobody should do your stealing. So I looked at the 10 Commandments afterwards, and there were literally 7 of them that were not really religious in religious in nature. Don't kill your neighbor. Don't covet their, pretty much every one of them are underpinnings of religious, but not being overtly religious. There's only 3 of them that had religious, like don't have another God before me. Okay, well, if I'm a Muslim or I'm a Buddhist, right? I'm going to read that and say, yeah, I kind of disagree with that one. And that one should not universally be applied. But if I'm a Muslim, which ones would I want them to follow that keeps me safe from those impulses of stealing, cheating, killing, and so on and so forth? So I say we take and we take the principles that are good out of religion, we disconnect some of them from their stories, and we modernize some of the ideals that are universal so we can help culture believe in something that is bigger than them. Because we can always tie it to who wrote this in the first place without being overtly religious in nature. And I think religion and my God is powerful enough that if someone needs to be led to religion, it'll happen. You don't have to force it to happen. So you don't think that if you putting a wording or calling it a certain thing is the crippling part that doesn't going to lead person to a religion. If it's powerful and it's intended to be, it'll happen anyway, regardless of what mankind throws at it. So I have faith in that direction that it is all powerful. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining me today. We'll be back tomorrow. MLO Bros will let you know any updates on their plight with Meta Facebook. Julie, Carter, all of you asked questions in the chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And have a good one, guys.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. This is original Youngstown content. Feel free to share our videos and tell your friends about us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. Thank you for your